Hey, what's up? Hello, I hope you all are doing well. As Nonfiction November has come to an end, I'm looking back on my promise that I would not make it through all of those books, and indeed I didn't. However, I did make it through one entire book and part of the way through the 3 others. So I thought I would share my progress with you today, as well as offer, I think, perhaps my only significant book haul of this year. As a lot of you know, I don't tend to buy books, and when I do, it's a really specific type of purchase, or I'm buying them for other people, and generally I buy them secondhand or from the library. So we can talk about some of those as well. But first, Nonfiction November. I set out to read 4 books. I read one of them and made my way through some part of the 3 others. The one that I made the most progress through without finishing it was the one I had also started most significantly before November hit, and that was Cast by Isabel Wilkerson. I made it about 70% through this book, and I'm listening to the audiobook of it, which is fantastic. I cannot remember the name of the woman that narrates it, but I know I've heard her voice on other audiobooks previously, and she is excellent. If you don't know this book, it sort of compares the way that the American society groups folks into castes, similar to the caste system in India, in a hierarchical system based on race. And this is a really fact-forward book, offering a breakdown of sort of the 8 different characteristics of caste and a lot of the historical underpinnings of how we got this way. It's a sort of a fresh take on how racism has evolved in this country. I've been learning a lot from this book. The author offers some personal stories which, as one might imagine, if you are not in her demographic, the stories are just hard to imagine that folks could be that way to other people, but indeed they are true. This is a really important book, I think, for us to understand the deeper subsections of the way that we unintentionally classify and group people, and how the society that we live in and the federal systems that we have in place support that. The author does make some particular emphasis in comparing obviously the system that she talks about in the United States to the caste system in India, and I was discussing this book with the consultant that I work with in my professional life, who is our diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice consultant, who is of Indian descent, and she mentioned that she found this book problematic from that comparative perspective. She was feeling like the author didn't necessarily have a full understanding or grasp of the caste system in India, and was drawing some conclusions that weren't necessarily quite as analogous as she presents them to be. So I had that conversation while I was making my way through this book, and it certainly impacted the way that I continued to read it and listen to it. I'm hoping to finish this book before the end of the year. There's only 30% of it left. I could definitely make it happen. This is a really important book because it does offer somewhat of a different perspective, a different analysis of race in the United States, and I think it's certainly important to hear from a multiplicity of voices. So if you're someone who doesn't necessarily feel like there's any more to be done, or is wondering what can you do to support this work, I would give this book a read, and I'll tell you if I still feel that way once I finish it. The next book I began was Palaces for the People by Eric Kleinenberg. This is how social infrastructure can help fight inequality, polarization, and the decline of civic life. I probably mentioned in my TBR video that I originally heard about this book on the podcast The Librarian Is In, the New York Public Library's podcast about books, culture, and what to read next, which I highly recommend if you like libraries and you like hearing about books and you like the occasional Broadway show tune thrown into your podcast. I made it through almost 50 pages of this book before I got distracted. I read the first chapter, which is conveniently about libraries, and the discussion of what social infrastructure is and how it is certainly dwindling. I'm really enjoying this so far. I think he makes a lot of points. I'm not sure that the author goes far enough in the points that he's making to necessarily be inclusive of all groups. Like, he talks about rough neighborhoods or bad neighborhoods, which is, to me, it's very coded language for places that are poor and primarily filled with people who are not white. So some of that could do well with being addressed. I'm interested to see if that type of language and that type of categorization continues throughout the rest of the book. But he goes on to discuss how places like libraries, where there is no transactional necessity in order to be there, there's nothing that you need to do or pay in order to be in a place like the library. You simply can be there and be in community with other people. So he'll address a number of those places as the book continues. I wanted to make more progress on this book. I found it engaging, but at the same time drier than some of the other books that I was in the middle of. So hopefully that doesn't dissuade me from finishing the rest. I made it 80 pages into American Detox, The Myth of Wellness and How We Can Truly Heal by Carrie Kelly. This is a book about a woman whose life is impacted by the events of 9/11. She loses her stepfather, who was a New York City firefighter. She loses him in that day's tragedy and goes down a path of wellness and what wellness means in terms of, you know, different types of supplements and yoga and this and that and all of the wellnessy, Instagrammy, green juice type things that we see out there, until she has this awakening that none of those are really, really helping her. I didn't quite get to the point in this book where she has changed paths. She's sort of right now just on the precipice of realizing that this isn't working and something needs to change. So I'm hoping as I continue with this book that there's more for me to learn. The other piece of this book that I'm really appreciating that the author touches on is how most of wellness is steeped in whiteness, and a lot of the wellness ideas and tactics and strategies that are pushed in mainstream society are aimed at wealthy white people who have the money, capacity, and time to engage in what society wants to deem wellness, when wellness is actually so much more than that, and there are a lot of social determinants involved there. So she's also taking apart the racial underpinnings of that term in this book, which I'm appreciating as well, and I hope to finish this also by the end of the year. Seems unlikely because I do need to give it back to the library, but we'll find out. And finally, the only book that I finished in Nonfiction November was Muppets in Moscow by Natasha Lance Rogoff. I just reviewed this book. You can check it out if you want. This, I think, was my favorite book that I read all year. Bex gave this to me for my birthday, so it'll double as my final Nonfiction November read and also the first book in my 2022 book haul. And this is indeed the unexpected, crazy, true story of making Sesame Street in Russia. If I could edit this title, I don't think that I would necessarily use the term unexpected. I mean, from what I read, it went about as well as it could go in Russia in the mid-90s. Nothing about what happened really surprised me. Yes, are there things that happen in the story that she tells of being part of that production team that are surprising or are crazy based on the way that we exist in the United States? Yes, but it was Russia in the mid-90s, so trying to impose those type of values in that space is going to be difficult. I take some issues with this book, which you can listen to in my review, but this was definitely the best book I think that I read all year, and I would recommend it to those of you who are interested in either Russian culture or Sesame Street. Now, other books that I have gotten this year primarily came either as birthday gifts or ones that I picked up at the library book sale, except for these first two, which I did order on my own. I have been looking for this particular cover of The Glass Books of the Dream Eaters by G.W. Dahlquist for almost 10 years. I first read this book when I was living in London for my university study abroad semester, and it is a sort of a steampunk adventure novel about this woman whose fiance has just taken off and broken off their engagement, and she doesn't know why, and she can't find him, and so she eventually is invited to this party where it is foretold that he will be, and she intends to approach him and find out why he broke off their engagement. In doing so, she meets up with Cardinal Chang, who is a hired assassin, and a doctor who is actually an imposter who has been asked to chaperone a young prince who is a little bit of a wild man, and the three of them cross paths at this party and things get absolutely out of hand. This book, this copy right here, is over 700 pages long, and somehow I read the entire thing while also going to school. Don't ask me how I did that, but I remember that I loved this book. There was such adventure. It was a beautiful adventure novel, just sort of sprinkled with old-timey things that I loved. I adore this cover and the masquerade mask, and you can buy this in the United States, but it doesn't come looking this pretty, and I don't know that it necessarily has all of these sort of epistolary pieces in the back and the blueprints and things. So I finally found a copy of this online. It was delightful to just bring this back into my possession, and I don't know when I'm going to read this, but once I do and I re-review it, it's all over for y'all. This is going to be something else. Now, regrettably, the next two books in the series, because The Glass Books of the Dream Eaters is the first book in a series, are not as beautiful, no matter what covers you get. The second book, The Dark Volume by Gordon Dahlquist as well, is not quite as exciting. It's cute, but it's not on the same level. I don't actually know what this book's about. I just know that it's the second one. And then the third book, I believe, is called Chemical Magic? Chemical something? Chemical with a K. It's an interesting spelling. But I had to have both of them, obviously, so that I can decide, you know, what's up. And I've decided that even if I don't like the sequel, I might as well just have them both anyway. They make a nice little pair despite the fact that they're different sizes. One is softcover and one is hardcover. But here's to hoping that this equally long book, it's about the same number of pages, I believe. Nope, it's not. It's 500 pages. The other one's probably really around 500 pages. It's just the text is smaller and it's softcover, but hopefully these will be nice. At the last library book sale, I also found the Book of the Month version of The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. You've heard me talk about this book time and time again. This is perhaps her most popular book here on the internet and clearly has something on the cover that needs to be cleaned off. But this is the story of a young writer who goes to interview Evelyn Hugo about her life and learns a lot about her in doing so. Evelyn Hugo being a former Hollywood star from way back in the 50s. I enjoyed this book when we read it with my book club. My book club pretty much resoundingly also enjoyed it. And I am totally not the one to give you an overview of what this is about. There are tons of people on BookTube who can give you a really wonderful explanation, but this is great and I'm really happy to have this copy so I can lend it out to other people. I was also really excited to find a copy of Fleischman is in Trouble by Taffy Brodesser-Anker. This has recently been turned into a television series, I believe, on Hulu, and I was really kind of taken aback to see that name pop up because I knew that it was a book first, and I had just gotten a copy of the book. So if that's not motivation to read it, I don't know what is. I have had my eye on this book for quite some time. This is about a man whose ex-wife drops their two children off on his doorstep one summer day after several years apart and just sort of dips out, and he goes on a hunt to look for her. Meanwhile, he's becoming wildly popular on the internet and doesn't know what to do with all of that popularity while also managing like patients that he's looking after at a hospital. And it's just sort of a wild drama about this man who suddenly dozens and dozens of things are happening to. It's billed as pretty funny, so I'm excited about that. We might read this for book club if I get my way, who's to say. And I can't wait to take a look at this and then also compare it to the show, because obviously I'll have to watch that after I read this book. I'll probably take this on in the new year and not before, but I'm excited that I have found a copy of this somewhere because I haven't seen it around. It doesn't seem to have as much popularity as I would have thought it would. I guess I was wrong about that too, because it's been made into a television show. This kind of hits that mark for me in like a contemporary fiction type of novel that is not steeped in being a romantic comedy or being literary fiction, but is just sort of, quote, regular fiction that has some humor to it. So frankly, I find this to be a rare thing that I'm interested in, so we'll find out whether or not it meets my expectations. The expectations that change every time. Continuing with, I guess, this trend of sort of madcap capers and adventures, I also picked up Troubles by J.G. Farrell, or perhaps Farrell, who's to say. This is a winner of the Lost Man Booker. But this is the story of a man who goes to Ireland to be reunited with the fiancée that he, and I'm quoting, acquired 3 years ago, and once he arrives in Ireland, cannot find her. This is Ireland in the year 1919, so lots going on there, and it's the story of this man running around Ireland trying to figure out where the heck his fiancée is and what she wants from him, and why there are, and I'm quoting, gently decaying ladies and proliferating cats. I don't know if that sentence is supposed to deter one from reading the book, but it certainly doesn't deter me. It's not exactly short. It's about 450 pages, and I have had good luck in the past with reading Irish authors. There's something about that cultural angle that I'm always really intrigued by, so hopefully this will be good. I'll take this on in the new year as well. I think this is set in the summer, so perhaps this will be a summertime book, but I had not heard of this previously, so if you have read this and you enjoyed it, I would love to hear your thoughts. And then lastly, this is a book I received for my birthday from my best friend from grad school, and that is Please Don't Sit on My Bed in Your Outside Clothes by Phoebe Robinson. You'll probably know Phoebe Robinson from Two Dope Queens. If you don't, there she is. This book resonates with me because I thought I was the very first person to ever talk about outside clothes, or as I call them, outdoor clothes. I have a very particular delineation between what can be indoor clothes and what can be outdoor clothes, and I was just delighted to see that there was a book that actually recognized one of the major things I really don't want people to do, which is come anywhere near a place where I sleep with outdoor clothes. Awful. I don't understand why people do this. The delineation between indoor and outdoor clothes began for me in college when you only have one room that you have in your primary residence for you to exist, and people come into it and sit anywhere they want. Which, I went to school in a major city, I went to school in Washington, D.C., no one should be anywhere near where I'm sleeping in clothes that they have just worn on a DC city bus or metro. Anyway, that being said, I was delighted by the title of this book. It's been on my radar for a while. This is a collection of essays. Phoebe Robinson is a comedian and writer and producer, and she offers just a series of insights about what it's like to be a Black woman in the United States, white allyship, not being a mother in a society that prizes motherhood above all else if you are a woman. So apparently there's no greater thing that you can be. And does talk a little bit about her time meeting Michelle Obama and moderating on her book tour. So this I expect to be a collection of humorous takes on some very complex problems. I do love a book of essays, especially by folks who are really funny, great writers. So looking forward to this as well, and also looking forward to learning what Phoebe Robinson considers outdoor clothes and what she considers indoor clothes. I hope we find that out. I hope I can vibe with her on that, to use a word that the youth love. So there you have it. There's a bunch of books that I've amassed across the last part of the year, as well as some books that I managed to not quite finish so well, and one that I did finish for Nonfiction November, as promised. If you've read any of the books that I've talked about, please let me know down in the comments. I would love to find out more about what I'm about to embark on. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having lovely weeks and lovely lives, and we will see you very soon.